The Brian Mudd Show is on Newsradio 610 WIOD.
It is 10:35. Welcome back to the show. Gesticulated so hard in the previous segment, my watch thought I fell. You know, the Apple Watch, you hear about the fall feature, and it is nice because if you really did fall and you couldn't get up, it definitely works. But if you wonder if you get false positives, yeah, you do. It's the first time, though, I've actually had it go off while I was just gesticulating doing the show. You know, your wrist starts vibrating. I just figured I was getting called or something. It's like, no, it's like, confirm you're okay. It's kind of like glass break sensors around the house. We've learned that any number of things, including cats just knocking things off of counters, can set off a sensitive glass break sensor. Anyway, somebody's trying to break into the Democrats' race in a big way, Michael Bloomberg, and he's got an uphill battle in numerous respects, and then one big tailwind. The tailwind being, of course, he doesn't need money. The uphill battle, he's trying to do what other Democrats have not before him, like skipping multiple states and still pulling out a highly contested election. Joining us now, get his thoughts on this, Dr. Nathaniel Cogley, Tarleton State University. It's good to talk to you, Dr. Cogley. Always good to get your thoughts. So what do you think at this point? Is it too late, or can Bloomberg make a legitimate entrance into this race?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Brian. I think this is a significant development. I've been saying for a while that I think the Democrats are headed for a brokered convention. Bloomberg is a very calculated person. I think he's wanted to run for president and didn't last spring because of his calculations on the Biden campaign. But in a brokered convention scenario, he doesn't need to go into that convention with a majority of delegates like we would assume someone entering late would have a trouble doing. He just needs to get a chunk. It would be hard at a brokered convention to give it to someone who hasn't been running. But if he goes into a brokered convention with a chunk of delegates, it's on the table for him to be the nominee.
Oh, okay, so let me take a couple steps back, because what you're saying is highly compelling in a couple of respects. Going back over a month ago, when there was some speculation again about Hillary Clinton, I never had an operative that would go on the air with me, but I did have one Democrat operative behind the scenes that said, look, Hillary Clinton is not going to run for president, but if we end up in a brokered convention, I guarantee you she'll be there and will be ready to accept the nomination if they'll give it to her. So what you're talking about here is a different version of a similar thing, which is Bloomberg at this point might be running the campaign, not necessarily expecting to be able to win enough delegates to be outright the Democrats' nominee by the time they get to the convention, but to make the case for his candidacy so that in a contested convention, now suddenly he looks like somebody they can go to. Is that more or less what you're thinking?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at a brokered convention, and we haven't had one since 1952, they can technically give it to anyone. But if they give it to someone not running, that's not going to sit well. And to have delegates is a big deal. Now, the Democrats have changed their rules so that superdelegates now can only participate at a brokered convention. So they would have about 18% of their delegates being added on a second round. And you can imagine those party insiders would be a little more calculated in terms of the matchup against Trump rather than some passionate socialist as their nominee.
Okay, and so what Dr. Cogley's talking about, if you hear the superdelegates, if you remember back to the 2016 cycle, approximately half of the votes were in, the delegates needed for Hillary Clinton, before votes were even cast in primary states, because superdelegates, these are high-level Democrat operatives or politicians in many cases at the state level, they'd already cast their support to Hillary Clinton in most cases before the season even started. And so the Democrats, in reforming their process because of the claims of it not truly being a democratic process, and Bernie saying it was rigged and everything else, that's what they reformed. So now you literally legitimately have to win these states. But the bottom line is, if you don't have someone who has a majority by the time they get to the convention, now anything can happen, and those delegates are free to go wherever they want to. So in this particular scenario, let me take another step back from that. I've been taking a look at the Democrats' race for president, and it reminds me an awful lot of Florida last year in our primary. Now, if you take a look at Florida's primary, we typically have not been a state to where our Democrats are among the hardest left, not the socialistic type of left. And I still don't believe that's the case. But what happened is we had such a contested primary for governor that you actually had someone who was the socialist in the race, Andrew Gillum, who with barely more than a third of Democrats' votes ended up getting through. Do you think that in the end there's a chance that you have a Bloomberg split with a Biden with whomever, and you actually have a chance to where you get the most radical, like a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren?
Well, I think the Biden campaign is really going to struggle if he loses Iowa, loses New Hampshire. He's not even head in the polls there anymore. And then come Super Tuesday, Bloomberg's doing this massive buy. That's going to hurt the Biden campaign even more. I just that the left is fractionalized between Sanders and Warren. If they ever consolidate, that's a big deal. But it's hard to see Bernie giving it up. This has been his passion to run for president for a long time. And then you see the center so fractionalized. And what's very interesting to me, Brian, is the Democratic rules to get on the debate stage is you need a certain number of donors and a certain registration in the polls. Bloomberg is saying he is not going to accept donations. So he is actively going against the rules to get on the debate stage, and he's going to be able to sell it as, well, the party's keeping him off the debate stage, but he's also going to avoid that forum where they can beat up on him, and he's just going to be running ads. It's going to be a massive ad buy. He's already breaking records, so people just watching football games are going to get a Bloomberg ad, and I just think it's going to work in some markets, especially open primary states where independents and Republicans can vote, not just Democratic base. So it's just going to fractionalize the field even more, and there is some opportunity for him to get some delegates here.
What does all of this mean to President Trump meantime? Anything?
Well, I mean, it means that the Democrats' process is still more unpredictable. It gives them, you just got to say, some people don't think Bloomberg's a great matchup, but who's their better matchup right now? Is it Sanders? Is it Warren? Is it Buttigieg? Biden? I mean, I don't see any of those as good matchups. Here, Bloomberg is certainly a person of accomplishment with a different temperament. It's interesting that they're both billionaires from New York City and they know each other. But, it's another potential matchup here. I think Trump might want to stay out of it, and let's see the Democrats, because it'll look pretty dysfunctional as they head to a brokered convention. The question is, once they come out of it, who is their matchup against President Trump? But President Trump has a year to focus on those swing states and general election messaging, whereas the Democrats have to focus on their infighting right now.
Well, speaking of infighting, there's a final question I had for you. What are the odds that if we do get to a brokered convention, Joe Biden invites the challengers to a fist fight?
Yeah, he's pretty tough, right? He keeps saying, come on. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think he's all talk, so, he can... I don't know that he'd do well in a real fist fight, but he always seems to be inviting people,
Now, who knows? Maybe somebody will take it up on him sometime.
Well, Trump's big, right? Trump's 6 foot. I don't know how big is Trump? 6'4" or something?
He's 6'4",
Trump's a big guy.
Yeah, he is a big guy.
So I don't know that Joe wants that, really. He just wants to talk about it.
Thanks, Dr. Nathaniel Cogley. Happy Thanksgiving. Appreciate it.
You too. Thanks, Brian.